Unless you've had your head in the sand for the past decade or so, rebooting franchises is a thing now. And one of the annoying things about reboots is that they often drop any sequel numbers or subtitles so that the original and reboot have the same name, thus making this a whole lot more complicated. So to be sure that there is no confusion, we will be talking about the release of Tomb Raider by Crystal Dynamics in 2013. Now you know. You are Lara Croft, a member of an expedition to the fictional island of Yamatai off the coast of Japan. According to the lore, this island is part of the Asian version of the Bermuda Triangle. Odd weather, missing ships, etc, etc. So of course they get shipwrecked and Lara finds herself alone and must gather herself to survive, find her crew, and solve the mystery of the island. Tomb Raider is Lara's origin story from timid college girl to survivor. At least that's what Crystal Dynamics keeps on going about during the promos. Mechanically, the game is a third-person platformer action-adventure. Lara discovers various weaponry and tools to shoot things and navigate the landscape. The game also features some quick-time-like scripted events that, while not featuring button prompts, it does limit your input during things like chase sequences. And when I say mechanically the game is a third-person platformer, it's because while the mechanics play as such, the narrative is a survivor one. But there's very little surviving mechanically, like eating food or scrounging for resources. You will hardly be lacking in them because there's ammo every 5 feet and your tools require no replenishment or maintenance. Upgrades also feel somewhat pointless too, because aside from a few story requirements, you really don't need most of them. Again, ammo is so plentiful and the enemies don't really present a threat that requires them. So for the completionist in you, they might be enticing, but otherwise they're skip-worthy. This clash of story and mechanics pretty much continues throughout the game. I mentioned in my last video the scene where Lara gets and fires a gun for the first time, but that isn't the most egregious clash of narrative and mechanics. Oh no. Note the biggest clash comes in about the middle of the story. Lara succeeds in contacting the outside world, and a rescue plane in the area tries to land, only to be brought down by mysterious weather. The pilot ejects and Lara hears over the radio that he needs help. As you are running to save the pilot who might be dying, you pass a cave and the game announces you could totally explore this optional tomb now. Look, I don't have a problem with optional stuff, and I love narrative pacing that motivates you to move quickly. But just like how potato chips and ice cream don't go together, neither does optional stuff at a time in the narrative that is trying to get you to get moving. It was so distracting that I just stopped in disbelief. Moving along to the story, the predominant focus is on Lara and how she handles the desperate situations she finds herself in, and overall the story is a mixed bag when it comes to the theme of origins. The biggest issue with this origin story is that we seem to come in about halfway through it. During her time on the island, Lara seems to have the knowledge to accomplish each task and challenge before she comes across it. It's not a bad thing really, but I feel like the story starts at the equivalent of the second half of Batman Beyond. It's as if that movie started when Bruce Wayne comes back to Gotham and invents the Batsuit. While that might have been interesting in and of itself, we wouldn't see Bruce's origins from rich boy mourning his parents, to his training, to his flight from the League of Shadows. Lara's origin story suffers from this issue as well. We don't see how she acquired her knowledge, and we are given little understanding of her drive to go on this expedition. It is alluded to that it has something to do with her late father. We are treated to some exposition delivered by another character about how cool her dad was, and she gives us some info that their relationship was a bit strained. But the entire time this is going on, I was wondering why I'm not playing that game. Even if it misses the mark on the origin story itself, the game does very well in showing Lara as a well-rounded character. Instead of the explorer with the exaggerated features of the previous games, this Lara has more character. She gets hurt, she's unsure of herself, she has to work through challenges and take risks. This Lara is far more human and vulnerable than previous incarnations of the character. But to me, the most important aspect of Lara is that she is not a survivor but a fighter. There are a lot of ways to be a survivor that do not entail heroism. But that Lara goes to such great lengths not only to survive but to escape with everyone she can save shows something greater. It turns her focus outward and she transforms from just trying to survive to become the hero. Her journey shows a woman fighting against crazy religious fanatics of a cult, Mother Nature via the terrain, and even supernatural powers, all to save the lives of her friends. My favorite part of the story is when she catches up with the kidnappers only to be captured alongside her friend Sam. At that moment when Sam undergoes a mumble spoiler to determine spoiler, Lara is seen trying to comfort her friend even at the brink of death, trying to instill hope in her friend at such a hopeless state. That moment more than anything else shows a fighter in the face of hopelessness, and I consider it to be the most defining moment in Lara's journey. A quick point I wanted to mention is that as far as religious elements go in this game, there is the aforementioned crazy death cult. And given that they are the only real representation of anything remotely religious in organization, we just have another crazy cult trope. There is a sympathetic character in Jonah, the ship's cook, that the game presents as spiritual. But yeah, aside from that, the majority of religious references are in regard to the supernatural death cult, so boo! Lack of balance. One last note. If there is one thing that's missing almost completely is the actual rating of tombs as primary objectives. You know, because it's called Tomb Raider. I mean, it's on the box art and everything. So one of the most key features of the Lara Croft character is missing from her origin story. Go figure. Instead, we have to wait for a sequel. So that's the long and the short of it for Tomb Raider. Crystal Dynamics set out to make a more believable Lara Croft and they succeeded. As far as the origin story itself, though, the game doesn't really know what it wants to be. It tries to tell the story of a survivor, but in the end tells the story of a hero. And the mechanics tell the story of an action platformer with third-person shooting. because nothing escapes the shadow of Call of Duty and Gears of War these days. But despite this mixed jumble of ideas, the game is still quite enjoyable for us story folk. That's all for today, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.